Who's afraid of Tulsi Gabbard? Everyone is. This is authored by Tom Luongo via Gold, Goats and Guns blog on Zerhedge. This is not the biggest news of the week, but it may turn out to be so if I'm right about what this means and where it leads. Former Representative Tulsi Gabbard formerly left the Democratic Party in a public announcement this morning on Twitter. Here's what she said in her full statement. I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that is now under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness who divide us by racializing every issue and stoke white anti-white racism, actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms. They are hostile to people, faith, and spirituality, demonize the police and protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, believe in open borders, weaponize the national security state to go after political opponents, and above all, dragging us even closer to nuclear war. I believe in a government that is of, by, and for the people. Unfortunately, today, the Democratic Party does not, and instead it stands for a government of, by, and for the powerful elite. I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party if you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country. I invite you to join me, she said. Gabbard's statement is a big deal given the timing, less than a month out from the midterm elections. I know a lot of people are really torn on Gabbard. She elicits from the Patriot or MAGA crowd the same kind of unthinking division that Donald Trump elicits from the world. There are few nuances takes on either of these people. This is because they represent threats to the people who are desperately trying to maintain control of the political and economic system. It does not matter if they are competent or not, since that system is failing rapidly. The socio-political immune system must be vaccinated against all foreign ideas. So the modus operandi is always the same. As they rise in popularity, seed and amplify their faults to gaslight some would-be supporters. In the case of Gabbard, it was her invitation to the 2015 WF Young Leaders Conference and her positions on key domestic policy issues. People don't like Gabbard for these reasons. Some of them are valid criticisms. Her voting record is progressive on domestic economic issues, but like a lot of young people, they come in with certain ideas and they leave with others after peeking behind the curtain. This focus on past specifics keeps many projecting personal anxieties onto them rather than assessing their personal journey. This precludes thinking strategically about how they can be an asset and only knee-jerk rejection from them for failing to pass some purity test. I might remind you what that type of behavior is reminiscent of. It's left brain dominance bordering on possession. This is threat assessment, a function of the left brain taken to its extreme. It's what drives wokeness as well as the opposite. We live in times designed for maximum anxiety. There are threats to our being and livelihoods multiplying seemingly by the day. President Biden is casually talking about nuclear war. FFS, we're all stressed out, and I get it. But too much of anything is a bad thing. The mechanisms of paranoia are the same for all parts of the political spectrum. And the anxiety pimps, H.T. Dexter White for that, with their hands on the levers of the psyops understand this very, very well. Giving in to those anxiety leads to only looking at how something can only be a threat rather than an asset. And if you're triggered by me saying this now, QED. This is no different than those who can only see the Fed as a threat and, for example, any and all past relationships Jerome Powell had with the bad guys, quote unquote, becomes prima facie evidence that fuckery is afoot. It looks like reasoning and analysis when it's just pattern recognition from previously being programmed. This is my primary point when it comes to Gabbard and her announcement this morning. The real psyops is not that she's some Klaus von Commie Schnitzel, triple agent leading us like a Pied Piper to our own doom. The real psyops is that many cannot consider her as anything else but that. If you doubt me, look at my Twitter feed this morning after I pointed this exact thing out. Tulsi Gabbard triggers people because they can't believe she walked up to the WF mountain, was offered the precious, and turned them down. But that is exactly what it looks like she did. This woman was the perfect Davos Trojan horse. She was young, attractive, well-spoken. She was also a woman of color who joined the army after 9/11 to serve for patriotic reasons, and on top of all this, a freaking Democrat. Yahtzee. When you look at the landscape for 2024, who do the Democrats have who are not completely Looney Tunes? Their rejection of her in 2020 was the big tell, and it had nothing to do with the Clintons. This was a woman who in 2016, after being groomed, quote unquote, for greatness, resigned from the DNC over Hillary's corruption of the primaries. At a moment in time, everyone, and I mean everyone, thought Hillary would be the next president. Even I didn't believe my own arguments that Trump would win in May 2016. Gabbard defied the most vindictive woman in U.S. political circles. A woman with a presumed body count that measures in the dozens, who were supposed to seal Davos deal to sell the U.S. out to the globalists and their planned Great Reset. That takes immense stones and speaks to a lot of personal integrity. Now, you can construct some MI6 John Le Carre narrative that she was just playing the long game for Klaus Schwab, but seriously, folks, Occam's razor is almost always valid. When she ran for president in 2020, was she promoted to be one who would stand with Joe Biden? No. If she was Klaus's girl, she would have been. She would have gotten more than one delegate. She would not have been given the Ron Paul treatment at the convention. No, what she actually did was destroy the presidential ambitions of the woman of color who had been chosen. That's Kamala Harris. And she did it without any DNC support whatsoever. She did it with almost no speaking time. It was the most effective political takedown in history, save Ron Paul's destruction of Rudy Giuliani in 2008. To believe this narrative that Gabbard was a WF Trojan horse means you have to believe in a stage play so stupid and complicated it beggars belief. So I ask everyone in the audience, if you are triggered by Tulsi Gabbard, reflect on why this is and where those feelings come from, because they ain't coming from her. She endorsed Biden very reluctantly. It made sense. She didn't like Trump personally, and she was still nominally a party member. She's not perfect. I don't need perfect in this environment. But per my previous arguments in January, Gabbard can position herself as a moderate populist, a kind of John Anderson figure from the 1980 election that ensures that no Democrat has a prayer of winning the 2024 election. If the GOP was smart, as big, and if there ever was one, they would begin the process of saying this recession is regrettable but necessary, embrace it, and build on the anger of Brandon for screwing everyone in the wake of COVID. They can see Gabbard coming in to pull centrist votes from Hillary or whoever back towards the GOP or worse, advocating for real fiscal and foreign policy reform in D.C., as she runs as a kind of John Anderson figure against Jimmy Carter. In fact, the more I think about this, the more likely John Anderson is the best analog for her role in 2024. She's a sane Democrat who's interested in practical solutions, pulling in a very important 5 to 7% of swing voters, tired of outright lying, the destruction of communities, and leadership turning a blind eye to violence and the coming rape of those same suburbs by Larry Fink and BlackRock. And that was then. Today, my thinking is even more insane. As a GOP VP candidate, she can be a voice of sanity on foreign policy and human rights, vaccines, social credit scores, etc., leaving her running mate to focus on domestic issues and rebuilding America. So, what does this announcement actually mean for the future? It means that my off the cuff hope for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis Tulsi Gabbard 2024 unity ticket I discussed with Gabbard Nixon on my podcast back in May is taking shape and right on schedule. I know that Robert Barnes believes and or has real information that the 2024 ticket is Trump DeSantis, and that may still be the default plan. I'm not privy to anything, just reading the tea leaves. But Trump has to navigate serious opposition as the Democrats try to take him out of the equation. Generals always fight the last war. Davos is fighting Trump when they should be fighting the generational shift just over the horizon from boomers to Gen X. The Democrats really think they can win in 2024 by taking Trump out of the picture through lawfare and blaming the country's ills on us not accepting their lunatic spending packages. Gavin Newsom is clearly positioning himself for this role. The fallback plan, if Trump is invalidated, would be DeSantis at the top of the ticket with someone else to soften the edges and bring the country together. There is no one else in American politics poised to do just that, than Tulsi Gabbard. And if you can't see the script of Gabbard giving a unified, edifying speech about healing the divisions and getting back to work at the GOP convention, then I've taught you not one thing in 5 years about how screenwriting actually works. DeSantis is killing it as Florida governor. Davos and the Democrats truly hate him because Ron's so damn competent and willing to play Alinsky games to win. They've never had one of those guys before. Joe Biden had to publicly praise the Republican Florida governor for his handling of the devastation wrought by the Hurricane Ian on the eve of the election. That's a big deal, folks. More evidence Joe should not be allowed to speak off script. And for this to work, however, there has to be a quid pro quo. The GOP will demand it. Gabbard switching sides cannot happen all at once. First, she has to walk away from the Democrats and help the GOP win a few seats in the House from the midterms. Check. Then she continues to build her credibility as a moderate who speaks against the things that presidential candidates can't speak on, or lose the support of the current crop of Davos-controlled Congress critters, anti-war, the MIC, etc. She'll be on Tucker Carlson very soon now, and a lot more going forward. By the time the 2024 conventions occur, the Fed tight monetary policy, the sovereign debt crisis in Europe, and war with Russia over Ukraine will have people focus almost wholly on domestic issues. Will be the worst recession depression since 1970s. Ukraine will quickly morph into Vietnam as a political albatross. If you think Americans don't want a war with Russia today, go out another 20 months or so when they can't feed their families or afford to drive to work. This is why the neocons in Davos are desperate to upgrade the conflict in Ukraine now. They have to flip the switch with the American electorate that Putin is our problem. He needs to be the scapegoat for the collapse. And that only happens with a casus belli that is incontrovertible. Putin continues to refuse to give that to them. If they can't get their just war and blame it on the GOP, then they have only the economy to run on. But Biden takes that heat while the GOP simply keeps pointing to being fiscally responsible in the face of Democrat insanity. By this logic, the best thing that could happen for this country is for the DNC to indict Trump and block his nomination for president. It paves the path to flipping the psychology of the whole center of the country to rejecting everything they are. Gabbard can make that case as an independent, a former DNC insider who walked the walk, as either VP or as the second coming of John Anderson, the man who ensured that Reagan could not be stopped. DeSantis does not trigger moderates the way Trump does. If anything, he's the governor most people want, even if they tell their friends they don't. Gabbard's strategic value is to this situation should be obvious. And this is on Zero Hedge. This is by Tom Luongo via Gold Goats and Guns blog. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.